So I'm going to start this little part of the speech with idea of what is reflective writing, and then later on to look at what is reflection in general. The point about reflective writing, which you're being asked to do for your assignment, is that reflective writing involves exploring an explanation of your experience of class and the groups in playing the game, in your academic reading, etc. So it's much more broad than normal academic writing. It even does things like includes the use of I, the first person, etc. But it is still requires strong referencing, strong considering. It may feel difficult at first. It may feel more challenging than other forms of academic writing, as it involves thinking and writing about anxieties and errors, as well as successes. So it's not, unlike most essays, most projects, which you'd expect to just put forward what you did well. Actually, we're looking at you to sort out where did you have problems, because it's through how you dealt with those problems that we understand whether or not you've learned a lot about strategy. So all these kind of interactions in class or individual, etc., in your group, carrying out the practical tasks, all these things must be melded together. It's an individual assignment, so you'll be talking about your group, also perhaps about your academic reading and what happened after the group had finished, etc., when you went off to work on your own. There are quite a number of reflective cycles, but Gibbs is one that I quite like, so I think let's have a look at this one. It starts with a simple point to describe what happened. So you simply explain, in our group today we discussed this. And this is what you could do in your reflective journal. Notice your feelings. I felt confident. I felt nervous. I felt worried. I do wonder how we're going to get on. Evaluate it. On the whole, I think the discussion went well, but unfortunately, I don't think I won the argument over this. I don't think we're able to get on with it. Describe what dissection you can make. What sense can you make of the situation? Right. I do believe that actually, if we look at our academic backgrounds, if we look at the variety of places we come from, I understand why certain people argued this way. Conclusion, what could we have done? What did we do? What are the other ways of doing it? What the outcome? If it arose again, if the same situation arose again, how would you deal with it? And that is basically the reflective cycle. Of course, through this thing, when you're talking about it, some of your description might be about which models you use, which strategic plans you want to do, what strategic modelling you wanted to take forward, and how what's good and bad about that. So these are kind of important, very important areas for consideration as we go forward. So how do you write reflectively? So set the scene. One of the best ways to start is what was your understanding of this nature strategy? But right at the beginning, even perhaps after listening to the first talk of the models, even before you start the course, when you first realize I'm going to be starting a module of strategic planning, what was the understanding of strategy? And this is where you'll need one or two academic references to back this up, perhaps from a textbook or from a journal, which says what is strategy or how do we think about strategy, what are the best ways to approach strategy. Sun Tzu, I'm a big fan of his work. Could be a place where you start. And then pick 3 or 4 over the entire course, not every week, but over the entire course. You should keep a journal every week and pick 1 or 2 models every week, but when you actually come to write up at the end, pick 3 or 4 examples from theories, ideas, models you think reflect exactly how the thing has worked. You could be case studies papers, 2 or 3 academic references, for instance. Is describe what is meant to you? How did you use it in the game? Or maybe why didn't you use it then? Perhaps you introduced the model to the group and the group rejected it and you actually think either that was the wrong decision and explain why, or actually why you realised afterwards that it was the right decision, that model was not appropriate. So how did it work out? Did it improve performance? Was it accurate and helpful? What would you do differently? How could it be improved? Okay. The final part of it, what would you do differently? What would you do in the future when making strategic choices? So this is one of you look forward. So on your weekly diary, you'll say what we might do differently next week, how you might approach things differently next week. But in the final report, your conclusion should deal with what went wrong, what one did differently, but it's also how you do in the future. So you say, when I go back to my job, if you actually go back to your workplace, I will think differently because of what I've learned in strategic planning. I will take things forward differently because I now understand how models work, etc. So I think it's important that you all include a mini conclusion in each week of the diary, but also think, and this points towards your end going conclusion. To get a good mark on this essay, your final report must be very forward looking. It must look to the future. I want to see words, I want to see diagrams, I want to see pictures. I don't want to see loads of words. I think there are times when actually, if you're going to use a theory, use a diagram. But don't just give me the diagram from the book. Don't just give me the diagram from the journal. Annotate them. So, for instance, if you use Porter's 5 forces, show the actual activities of the game or the cases, etc., within the diagram. Don't just write what the 5 forces are in theory. I can look that up in the book. I know that. I want you to actually tell me what you use, what you came out in the diagram. Okay, and many of you will produce excellent slides for your PowerPoints, etc. So you can use these as diagrams inserted into the text. So if you're doing a presentation, either individually or as a group presentation, you can include in there, put the group name, the date in the bibliography. In the bibliography, use group name, presentation at University York, date of presentation, etc. Depending on which one they actually are, which one you're doing. So how do you actually use academic evidence? This is a master's level project. I expect to see good evidence of reading, good evidence of academic understanding of what strategy is. So when you analyze individual events, think about what the models you use, but also think about what the theory said about how the outcome should have been. If you use a SWOT, did it actually give you the kind of insight that is often argued that SWOTs are supposed to do? If you use a pestle, did it give you the insights that a pestle is supposed to do? Did 5 forces really reflect the nature of the environment in which you're working? So actually think about this in using the academic evidence to back it up and criticise it. To get a distinction, even to get a merit, I expect to see synthesis here and arguments. So are your observations consistent with the theory? Is it actually working the way that you would expect it to from reading them up on the models, reading the published academic evidence? Can the theories help you to interpret your experience? Maybe they're not exactly right, but maybe there are ways in which you can look at the theories and say, actually, I can understand where they're coming from, even though I don't think they were correct. And this is actually the nature of synthesis. And a very simple way of synthesis is if you're starting to annotate the models by putting your own feelings, your own experience in there, what you actually did. You've got people who think synthesis and think, oh, as part of my master's level writing, I'm supposed to come up with new ideas. That's too hard. Well, actually, it can be as simple as this: annotate an existing model. So annotate, synthesize theory and practice, and this will allow you to modify the models. This will allow you to actually make your own proposals. This will be something where you're actually becoming a master of your subject. That's why the degree you're being awarded is a master. So be selective in using evidence reflective writing. Look at what was successful, look at what was particularly challenging, and reflect deeply on these significant aspects and learning points. I do not want to see you write about 500 words on every week. You must pick out key things over the 7 or 8 weeks that you were learning where important things happen, maybe 3 or 4 of them, which actually show how you use strategy, how you came to understand strategy. So I think it's very important that you look and reflect deeply on a few significant aspects. I'd rather see you go to depth in a few areas than trying to be too general across the whole course. Discuss your reflection with others. This will help you deepen your insights and improve your ability to express your ideas. It'll help you to explore a range of perspectives. Of course, in the end, you're writing an individual essay. You need to put forward something that is very individual about you, but it's very, very plausible, very possible for you to do this. I think it's also important that you look at things that actually, where else may we be able to find information from? I really want to see, because I think it's at the core of becoming a strategist, it's very important that you understand this idea of homo strategicus and group work, etc., and group thinking, all these kind of things. All these things must be part of your work. All these things must be part of your reflection so that you can become a good, efficient strategist. Because I'll be honest, I believe in strategy, I believe in the importance of strategy. And I also believe that many of the models we use for strategy are wrong. I believe that both from experience and also from theory. So I think if we can go forward and make some significant changes to the way we think about this, we can be very, very successful. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so intense, perhaps, about the way I get you to study and get you to learn. So what references should you use? Well, I suggest you use, firstly, academic references. Use textbooks. Use scholarly books. Use journal articles. And it's most important that you use journal articles. And the second most important thing is you use conference proceedings. Books of various types are important, but your majority of your references must be journal articles and or conference proceedings. And secondly, there's online research from the universities, from research publications, etc. These are also good. The main course, when you're told how many references you should have, etc., in any given essay, then this will actually be related to the number of academic references. The nature of strategy is that you'll also need to produce a lot of non-academic references, and these are maybe to do with, like, when you're studying the environment, you might look at the BBC website, you might look at other newspaper websites, you might look at the Guardian, for instance, you might use lecture notes, you might use group work and discussion. These are all important, and these things must be referenced. And so you might say, well, when we're doing an environmental scan, I went to this website about Africa, I went to this website about China, I went to this website about the European Union, etc. When I was doing my internals audits, I went to these sort of websites. These all need referencing. But when I say to you, I want so many references, what I'm referring to specifically is the number of academic references. Why are we asking you to reflect? We're asking you to reflect because it will strengthen your understanding. We believe it gives you a deeper appreciation of the material. It'll embed it in your memory. Used by, but remember, it's also used by many professional institutions. So we embed this thing in your memory. You actually get to use it. But many of the professional institutions, when you leave here, you use it to qualify higher levels of membership, fellow or charter. For instance, I'm a fellow of the Higher Education Association. I needed to reflect. I need to write a reflective piece to get that. I'm also an engineer, but I'm not a chartered engineer, but I'm working my chartered status at the moment, and I need to write reflective diaries on skills, etc., that I've learned while doing that. So it's very, very important. And ones that Institute of Engineers definitely uses it, Higher Education Academy uses it, Chartered Management Institute uses it. So all of these are areas in which if you want to progress, you need to do reflection. So they are starting to understand the importance of reflection outside. It is not just an academic skill. It's a skill that will be very useful for you and very important for you going forward in your careers. As I noted in the academics writing, it's unusual to use I or use the first person, but in this sort of reflective writing, you will do. However, you also have to recognize that it's also a piece of academic work. So in fact, what people find difficult is that the fact you need to use both first person and the third person. And I don't want to see two completely separate sections. You can get a pass if you have 2,000 words on academia and 1,000 words on reflection, but the reality is the two should be intimately linked together, even possibly within the same paragraph. And that is what if you want to do, if you want to get a merit, if you want to get distinction, if you want to get the higher grades, you need to be doing that. Balance it, weave them together, therefore. If you want to get the higher grades, it's much more effective to do it this way. Final tips. Don't just describe what happened, explore and explain what happened. Be honest. In this type of writing, it's okay to admit making mistakes as well as successes. It's okay to say, we did this wrong, we had to learn from this, we're trying to go forward. What you're trying to do is show improvement, showing learning. If you didn't make any mistakes at the beginning of the course, then you can't have learned anything, because you haven't learned enough to realise where your mistakes were, because you will have made them. Be selective. Don't write about everything. Write about what you consider the key turning points of the next few weeks. And everything must look to the future. How are you going to use this in the future? How are you going to be a strategist in the future? How are you going to think about applying and using strategies? So summary, start with what your thought strategy was. Do not describe the whole course. Pick 3 or 4 parts. Theory and practice, synthesize these together. Use references. More diagrams, less words. End not with where you are, but where you are going. This is a learning journey you are documenting. And if you use it correctly, if you learn to reflect, it will help you to develop as an individual, but it will also be important in helping with your career.